It's lovely to see you again, and also thank you for all your support with Down Under as well too. I remember our time together, and that was a very difficult film to release and get out into the world, and I really appreciate you getting the word out there the way you did. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that. I really did also want to start off with a bit of housekeeping about Down Under. Just about,
Sure.
what the fallout of the film's release was, and
Yeah.
maybe what lessons you learned from, and just about the
Yeah.
whole experience of the release of
Um,
Down Under.
well, look, I was happy with the finished film, which at the end of the day, as a filmmaker, is all you can really hope for. It was a very difficult film to release for obvious reasons. It was a movie that invited the audience to laugh at a certain type of horrible behavior and then very deliberately punish the audience for finding that behavior amusing. So it was a challenging movie for an Australian audience, and it was meant to hold up a very uncomfortable mirror to the audience. And so, you know, creatively, like I said, it was everything that I intended it to be. It also led to Little Monsters, both creatively and also from financially, from people that invested in the movie that were very big fans of the movie and came on board as our producing partners. But releasing that movie was tough. I'm not gonna lie. The whole point for me of making that movie was making us question certain things about ourselves and our society. And weirdly, I think if that movie was being released now, it's actually even more relevant than when it was released in 2016. That Down Under was made because I felt like we weren't addressing certain things in our past, and now it feels like the world is sort of has caught up in a really horrible, horrible way. So, but then, continuing the answer to your question, whereas Down Under was very pessimistic about the state of the world and humanity, Little Monsters was deliberately me trying to make something very optimistic, and I couldn't make another Down Under for a multitude of different reasons. So Little Monsters, I wanted to remind the audience of actually what is good about life and what is worth celebrating.
Just one aspect of what you said there, I'd like you to unpack just
Sure.
quickly. You mentioned how, as disappointing in many respects Down Under was, it did help you financially get Little Monsters up.
Yeah.
Can you just explain, because it sounds incongruous, how can a film that kind of didn't really find an audience benefit you? I like the fact that it can actually still help a filmmaker, even if the film doesn't really succeed, to go on to make their next film.
I think well, I know because Down Under had been made from a very truthful place from me, and saying a lot of things that I wanted to say uh, in the unconventional way of which Down Under makes its points with comedy. At least something doesn't need to be a box office success uh, in terms of at least people recognizing my ability to be able to tell a story like Down Under was told. And then I had Little Monsters as a script. So we were able to take that script out into the marketplace, and people were able to watch Down Under and understand that I could at least put a story together visually and with all the many different ways you need to make a movie, and certainly too, you know, getting cast like Lupita and Josh involved in the movie as well. They were able to read Little Monsters and then watch Down Under and get a sense that, oh, okay, this person, we feel like we're in safe enough hands that this person's going to be able to execute this new story on the page. But also just, the more films you make, the more practice you get at just telling stories as well too. And it's the no matter what you're working on, the thing that is most satisfying is actually just seeing a story through from beginning to end. What happens afterwards, whether or not it reaches a big audience or not, you've just got to sort of take it. Like when Little Monsters started connecting the way it has overseas and with the festivals that it's played at, I wasn't running around, jumping for joy, getting a big head about it. I was just so very relieved that people were discovering it and responding to it in the way that I intended. And also, you breathe a sigh of relief too because you go, okay, I can now take this and funnel that into the next project, and that will help me get the next one up. Much the same way that even though Down Under didn't, reach a big audience here in Australia or around the world, it had its fans that have enabled me to keep making movies.
I like that. In shorthand, because you're not the first Australian filmmaker this has happened to, it might not have had a big audience, but it got seen by the right people.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, terrific.
Yeah.
Now, to move on to your crazy, silly little film, which I've seen twice.
Oh, really?
I think it's a really enjoyable, funny, just out there comedy. Can you just very quickly, because I know, mate, I know you've said this a million times. I've seen all the clips on YouTube, so I appreciate that I'm asking you for the 1,001st time this question. But if you could just nutshell it for us, and perhaps nutshell it for us in a way that you haven't done before, but can you just quickly just describe the outline of Little Monsters and explain how you arrived at it?
I can answer that exactly in the ways that you've requested. The elevator pitch of this movie is a kindergarten class find themselves caught up in a zombie apocalypse. Thanks to the quick thinking of their teacher, Miss Caroline, played by Lupita Nyong'o, not only are their minds prevented from having zombies rip them apart, their minds are also stopped from being corrupted by the horrors that are around them, because she pretends the whole thing is make-believe. The movie, for me, is a very personal movie. It's about everything my son has taught me about being an adult. And it's about his first year of kindergarten. He has a number of very scary food allergies. And it was a terrifying thing for me to give him over to his kindergarten teacher, because he'd never been out of my care. And luckily for him and for me, his kindergarten teacher was amazing. And so that really made me realize how underappreciated kindergarten teachers are. I mean, maybe they're not, but I felt like I'd taken for granted what kindergarten teachers do for us and for our children. So this movie is a celebration of what it means to be an adult through what children can teach us. And it's also a love letter to my son, and it's a love letter to kindergarten teachers and everything they do for us and our children.
See, one of the great things about this film that I find it unique in zombie filmland is that while it obviously joins the genre of zombie films, it can stand alongside Dawn of the Dead and so on, I think it's the only zombie film so far that you can also put into the category of teacher films and put it alongside Goodbye Mr. Chips and Mr. Holland's Opus. Well, this is also counts as a tribute to teachers and the good that they do us.
Well, look, I never set out to make a zombie movie. It just happened to be zombies were the best way of articulating everything that my son had taught me and his experience in kindergarten. So it wasn't like I sat down and went, I need to do my version of a zombie movie. It was just I had this idea that made me then able to funnel everything that my son has taught me. And the really lovely thing about spending this last year traveling with the movie and screening it all around the world to different countries and cultures has been the very personal things that my son has taught me. I've seen people connect to because they're universal, and that everything that he's taught me, I now have the benefit of going, oh yeah, right, this is stuff that people have been experiencing in their own way for as long as humanity has been around. So it's a really good reminder too for me to kind of, I'm only really interested in telling stories that are personal in one way or another. And I think if you're taking that path, chances are you're going to find people along the way that recognize the same things that you're going through. But the trick is to try and then tell them in an unconventional way.
Now, Abe, if this film is a tribute to teachers, especially to early learning teachers, what are you saying about children's entertainers?
Well, so this is one of the downsides of having a child is that you spend a lot of time up in the first 5 years watching a lot of children's television, and your mind, or at least my mind, couldn't help but wonder, like when I'm watching the shows that he was sort of watching growing up, and thinking, well, what would that person be behind closed doors, and why wouldn't they be any different to look? Like I said, this movie is about the best of human behavior personified through the way children see the world, and it's also about the worst of human behavior that people can fall into when they're adults. And for me, it was much more interesting to have the most horrific adult in the movie be someone that actually comes from the world of children's entertainment. And surely one of the Wiggles was like that at some point.
We'll stress at this point that you meant that as a complete joke, just in case any of their lawyers are watching this. Now, again, just returning very quickly to the nutshell mode of this interview, everyone who saw the film is asking how you got Lupita Nyong'o involved in this film, and also how did you get the rights to Taylor Swift songs? Can you quickly just cover those two areas? It would have everyone's head scratching.
Look, Lupita was just, for me, she was how important that role is to the story, but also what I wanted to say with this movie. I needed an actor that could personify that character in the multifaceted way that she is written, but also I needed an actor that could convey the truth of her. And for me, Lupita was just that ultimate person for me that I could not see anyone else playing that role.
How'd you get her?
Everyone recognised that
the zombie movie is the movie you make before you win the Oscar. She won the Oscar, and then there's the zombie movie.
There's the zombie, then she comes to Australia to make the low-budget zombie movie.
And she stepped up.
Yeah,
she's totally committed to this role. Well, you see it in the performance; it's incredible.
Well, she's an actor that needs to be challenged. She says this, and she's very upfront about this. She needs. Look, okay. So I got her by. We sent her agent the script. I'm with the same agency as her in America. We're both with CAA, but it's a very big agency and a lot of different agents. So we're not with the same agents, but that at least managed to get the script in front of her agent. It happened to coincide with a time for Lupita where she'd just finished doing Black Panther. She was looking for something completely different. She said to her agent she wanted to do something unconventional, and she was looking at doing a comedy. Her agent put it in front of her, I think with the caveat of, like, well, it doesn't get any more unconventional than this. Lupita just responded to all the truth and all the things that I had written about that character and that I wanted to say with this movie. Lupita just responded to and spoke to her in a very personal way. And then, within 24 hours of her reading the script, she and I were Skyping much like you and I are now. And then 24 hours later, she was on board. So it was one of just those bizarre instances where you visualize an actor playing a character, and then a couple of a month later you're sitting opposite that person in a rehearsal room and you go, my God, it actually happened.
Abe, can I just clarify? Yeah. Was she responding to the script itself, or did she also read cover notes from you about the character and what the character represented?
She initially she'd just read the script, and then we had this 2-hour Skype conversation where we were sizing. Well, she was sizing. I was going to say we were sizing each other up. She was sizing me up. But then, and part of that conversation too is her making sure that if she's going to take this very unconventional choice to come to Australia and make a movie like this, she just wanted to make sure that she was in good hands. And this is a benefit that I have having come from an acting background in the past too, is I know what it's like to be an actor on a movie set, and I know what it's like to work for directors that don't actually believe in what they're doing. I really believed in this script, so I know that she sensed that and then realized that it was still going to be a risk for her to do a movie like this, but there was enough. She was getting enough information to kind of feel comfortable about taking that risk. And then as soon as she got here, she just had the best time. We all had the best time. When she and I are working on something else together at the moment as well too. She is. I know this might probably sounds really ridiculous and stupid, but she and I are very similar in the sense that we both need to be in a place where we feel like we're taking a big risk in order to be able to find a truthful way of making something work. So we united in that way. And similarly, Josh Gad was very similar as well too. Josh is he's got an incredible comic mind and amazing timing. But he's spent now a big part of his career working for Disney, playing characters like Olaf in Frozen and in Beauty and the Beast. But he's also the guy that was on, Book of Mormon on Broadway for Trey Parker and Matt Stone for 4 years. So he's got a very subversive streak to his personality. So he was taking a big risk. In some ways, as big or if not a bigger risk than what Lupita did, because he was potentially completely ruining his brand in at Disney. But again, he approached his character from a truthful place as well, and he let off a lot of steam playing Teddy McGiggle. He had such a good time.
Now, Abe, can you just shed a bit of light on the test screening process? Which in America, I understand, is absolutely mandatory, especially for a comedy. Even directors will insist that the film go through a test screening process. Can you tell me about your experience with test screenings? Was it mandatory, or did you insist on it? And is it widespread? Because my understanding is that most Australian films don't go through a test screening process.
Yeah, look, I can't speak for other Australian films, but I can say that we actually edited a lot of this movie in America. We cut half of it here in Australia, and then so we cut for like 3 months in Australia, and then like another 2 months in America. And the reason that we did that was because I was trying to make this movie play for an American audience. So I recognized that I was only going to truly be able to do that until I wasn't going to be able to do that until I screened it in front of Americans. So we did a lot of test screenings. We did a lot of very small ones, and then we did this huge one at the end of the process in front of 300, a recruited audience from Long Beach in California. So, suburban Los Angeles came to see this movie. They didn't know anything about it other than Lupita and Josh were in it. I personally, I can't make a movie without going through the testing process. I'm not the kind of filmmaker that has my deep personal story to tell and fuck you if you don't get it. That's what I intended it to be. I do have personal things to tell, but I recognize that I need an audience. I want to make it play for an audience, and I get much more satisfaction on making something play for an audience, but in an unconventional way, but that delivers something that they were hoping for. So, and that's a very American way of looking at making a movie. Americans go to the movies to be sort of nourished, and there's certain rules that you have to sort of abide by if you're going to make something work for an American audience. But you can also, if you tick the boxes in the right way, you can also have fun then subverting those expectations at other times as well too. But this movie is a very strong 3-act structure. It delivers things precisely when the audience kind of needs them to. It ends in a very optimistic, upbeat way. I mean, the end of Down Under ends with characters basically beating themselves in some instances to death, whereas this movie ends on a song. It literally ends on a song. So it's like they couldn't be more different, and maybe that has something to do with the fact that this movie's connected a lot more than the other one.
Just in parentheses, was Down Under test screened?
Yeah, we tested that in Australia actually too, and similarly too, because there's just, it's particularly with comedy, there's just certain timings of gag and things that you really need to kind of like work through and work out, and you don't get that until you actually put it in front of an audience. And look, you also, and I think this is something that I have noticed. When you're in post-production on something, you really have to be prepared to put yourself in a position where it's going to be difficult and uncomfortable, and you need to push through that stuff to then suddenly, for me, it's like the edit is 98% of the time it doesn't work, and then all of a sudden for the final 2% it all just comes together and it starts working. But you've just got to have sort of faith and trust that you will get there, and just keep being your own biggest sort of critic and inviting people in to watch something that you know is not going to work, because through those putting yourself up for that experience, you will eventually discover the thing that does. And I think, yeah, I don't know if I don't know if that is a very Australian thing. I think in Australia, I do know a lot of schedules with edits just tend to be for like a couple of months, and then they get moved through sort of the other stages of post-production. We had the benefit with this movie of we kept cutting until we got it right, which was about 6 months.
Was that because of the American involvement?
Partly. I mean, I had really great producers on this, and everyone was just like, no, this is going to take time. This is a movie that has big tonal risks. So for that reason, we can't expect it's just going to magically fall into place. And it was probably the hardest thing I've ever gone through was post-production on this. But there's a reason why.
You got to deal with Hulu. This is coming out on the streaming service Hulu, which, Abe, I understand is a pretty big deal.
Look, it's yeah. We had to make the choice. Did we want to go streaming, or did we want to go something more traditionally theatrical?
And that's my question to you, because streaming is obviously a very big part of exhibition now. theatrical still obviously has a huge place, but as a filmmaker, as an artist, as great as it is to get a streaming deal, what would you actually prefer? Would you prefer the film to run theatrically first before being available on the stream, or do you just accept that inevitably the stream will take over?
Look, we had the benefit of the only country that we did a streaming deal with was North America on this, and so and we made that choice for a number of reasons. The It's no surprise that it is extremely difficult. It's always been extremely difficult to release a movie theatrically. It's become even more difficult, for a number of reasons. And you could argue that streaming is one of the things that has disrupted that. But I would actually make the argument too that, streaming is actually enabling certain films and certain filmmakers to make things that there was no longer a space for with exhibitors. So, and we've got a good kind of lot of screens being released in the UK with Little Monsters, and I'm going to be really interested to see how that for us is like, oh, okay, this is kind of our test case for a big screen release. Whereas, we made the streaming deal with North America, and it's getting a different release here in Australia. But I know that we made the choice to go with Hulu, and I can speak personally because they presented something to us where we knew that a lot of people were going to get to watch this movie, that people were going to have the opportunity, even though I designed this movie to be played on the big screen. And that's how I've experienced the movie, traveling in film festivals. At the end of the day, having made Down Under, it was actually just really important for me that people saw this movie. And part of the joy now, it launched on Hulu a couple of weeks ago. A lot of people are now all of a sudden, so more people in the first couple of days of it being on Hulu saw it than anything else I've made in my entire career combined. So, and for me, it's just about being able to have the opportunity to make the next thing. So to be able to know that you've got something out there that is being seen and people are receiving the way I intended, that's worth its weight in gold for someone like me at this particular stage of my career.
Was there a version of the screenplay that went full on Stephen King, where the kids discover halfway through the film that our teacher is trying to do the right thing, but we now know that the zombies are real, and that the kids take up arms against the zombies, start killing them? Was there ever a version of the screenplay that went down that avenue?
There was no, but but in answer to that question, there was a period in post-production where some people involved, but kind of in an outer way, but sort of involved with the movie, said to me, yeah, but what is it? It's not a hardcore, bloody, violent, extreme genre movie, but it's also not a family movie. And I was like, that's exactly right. That's what it is. Like, and for me, it was much more interesting kind of making something that was some people said the genre crowd isn't going to like this because it doesn't deliver. I'll just give an example. This happened at a test screening. Someone got really agitated, a genre person got really agitated and said, you didn't show when they got into the souvenir shop and they've suddenly barricaded in from the zombies. You've got to show them banging the nail into the wood against the door. You've got to show them doing this. I was like, I don't need to do that because we've seen that before and it's not actually interesting. Like, for me, it was like the genre element of this movie was just something to trigger all of the emotional stuff that the characters go through. And so a big part of making this movie was just sort of letting it reveal itself and what it ultimately ended up becoming. Lupita and I had this saying to help us just manage working with 11 5-year-old children for 4 days a week for 8 weeks, which is when the kids are acting up and they're just being kids, you can try and fight them and get them to do something which they obviously don't want to do. But if you do that, you're not going to get them there and you're just going to frustrate yourself in the process. So Lupita and I came up with this saying to help us get through the shoot, which was follow the truth, embrace the chaos. And that saying got us through the shoot, but then actually guided us in the edit as well too. You'd have crazy genre stuff happening, but then you'd just be reminded to follow the truth of what the characters and the kids are going through at any given moment, because that's the thing that makes the audience connect with the story. They're your eyes into the story, and then weirdly, follow the truth, embrace the chaos has now actually ended up being something that I apply to my own life in so many different ways as well too. So this one kind of thing that we needed to get through it actually ended up being the thing that guided the entire process.
Abe, thank you so much for this interview. Thank you so much for getting this film out so promptly too. I love the fact that it's only 2 years, if that, since Down Under. Are you planning on maintaining that kind of pace? Because I think it's important for filmmakers to maintain their connection with audiences. And so are you intending on that kind of output?
I hope so. We've got a couple of things, but something that is looking good for happening next year. So if that comes to pass, then yes, because I agree. So much of I'm just dealing with stuff that I have going on in my life at the age that I'm at, being a parent and all these things, and I'm able to funnel that into my work, and I hope I can keep sort of doing that, because it's helping me relate to my own life by able to make things like Down Under and Little Monsters. So yeah, I have every intention, and the good thing is now I'm making money from it in order to be able to really focus on it and not anything else too. So yeah, thank you for saying that, and hopefully I won't let you down and see you again in a couple of years.